Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's move on with our first session on Inside the Cyber Trenches, a deep dive into cybersecurity case studies. This session will be moderated by Mr. Bryan Chung, member of Digital Technology Implementation Committee DTIC MIA. Joining him as the speaker for this session, Mr. Karthik Sundar, Director Risk Advisory Deloitte Malaysia. Now over to you, Mr. Bryan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and I hope everyone had a restful Labor Day yesterday. So before I begin, just a bit of introduction of myself. So in my day job, I run a venture capital fund, and in the venture capital fund, we invest in startups, tech startups primarily. And if you ask me 10 years ago, if cybersecurity was, one of the top priorities, that we look at, or one of the top aspects of a business that we look at, my answer would probably be no. It's all about, market share. But today, because of the extent of us being interconnected, through mobile, through the web, and the amount of data that startups are collecting, so that they can give personalized service to their customers, cybersecurity has become a very important consideration. As a VC fund evaluating, whether or not it's feasible, right, to invest into that particular startup. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity. Yes, it may not be as exciting or sexy as AI. But it's a very essential element of any businesses today, because we are so interconnected digitally. So when this topic was given to me, and I read the title, Inside the Cyber Trenches, right? And when someone mentions to me the name trench, okay, maybe I should ask, if someone were to, mention this trench, the word trench, what comes to your mind? Okay, so what came to my mind, you can move to the next slide. What came to my mind was, trenches is usually, the word trenches usually used, during wartime, where soldiers will build trenches so that they can go underneath and, they could attack the enemy. Okay, and I think that the title was is apt because we are, we can draw a lot of parallels. Yes, there's, in fact, right now there's the real war happening, right, in different parts of the world. But in the digital world, we are facing a war as well. Okay, so the title really encapsulates, a situation we are in. So if you look at a picture, the picture actually gives a lot of points, observations, of where we are in the digital world, what we are facing in the digital world today. Okay, next slide. So I've got a few points, observations. So first observation is this: all of us are in warfare, whether we like it or not. Okay, I'm not talking about those, where people kill one another, but I'm talking about in the cyber world. We are all in a warfare. Particularly, you're running a business and you are collecting a lot of data, and you are storing a lot of data. There is that incentive, for third party, or what we call threat actors, to infiltrate, right, and misuse the data. So we are in a warfare. Yeah. Second point, we will be attacked at different positions and weapons. Okay, so it's not just about emails alone. It's not just about, where you open up your browser. It could be anywhere. It could be on your phone. It could be, while you're using an application. And the attacks, can come, at different times. And weapons are being used. Different weapons are being used. So you may have, some sort of a defense, a firewall that you have built, but it may not be enough, because the weapons keep evolving, just like a war. Next. We will have to take various positions and use weapons to defend, right? Because you are being attacked. So therefore, you need to know what are the positions that the enemy will be coming to you. And also what are the weapons, that are adequate, right, to defend yourself from the attacks of the enemy. Next point. We will be attacked again, perhaps at greater intensity. So whilst you can fend off the attacks of an enemy, you cannot rest on your laurels because the enemy will come back to you again, as we see in the real war, right? So you're going to be attacked again, and therefore, you need to be prepared, okay? So it's not just winning one war, we are really in a battle. So in the battle, we have many wars to fight. Last point. So we will need better weapons to defend, because as we are attacked, the infiltrators, the threat actors, the enemies will know, the level of defense that we have, and then they will upgrade, their weapons, and therefore when we are attacked again, we will need better weapons to defend ourselves against the enemy. All right. Next. So this was a report that was done by Cybersecurity Malaysia. They call it Mid-Year Report 2023. Now, my intention is not to highlight, wow, government is 22%, right? It's the biggest, which is understandable, right? Because the government has a lot of data, very important data about individuals, right? My intention of showing this is really to draw on the others. Okay, so you have 22, 9%, 6%, 6%, right, in the 4 sectors, but the others is 48%. Okay, so what does it say? It says that there are many, many industries out there that are subjected, to cyber attacks. Okay, so it's not just one particular industry, for example, retail. Okay, it tells you that whatever industry you may be in, you are prone to the attacks. Okay, so I think we have to be mindful, whilst, the startups, which collect a lot of data, or any companies or businesses that collect data, we probably think that they are more prone, to cyber attacks. Maybe not, certain businesses, you may not have a lot of data, but you have other assets, that could be valuable, for threat actors to use. Okay, next. So to what extent SMEs are affected? So I would like to, just draw this point because big companies, corporates, you realize that they will have the budget, right? And typically for SMEs, cybersecurity, it's not really top of the priority, because there's a lot of other more pressing priorities, right? But if you look at the stats that's shown here, it's pretty sobering. 84% of SMEs in Malaysia have been compromised in cyber threat incidents, whether it's to a small extent or to a big extent, 84%. Yeah, that's a big number. 76% SMEs have suffered more than one attack. Okay, so maybe you ask any companies, maybe you even look at your company, has it suffered an attack in the last 2 to 3 years? Okay, so there is a silver lining, however, and recently CPA Australia did a small business survey in 2023, and it showed 52% of Malaysian businesses were proactive in reviewing cybersecurity protection in the last 6 months. So that's very heartening to note that SMEs, small businesses, are beginning to be aware and are beginning to take action, against these attacks. There were 38% of business reporting lost time and or money due to cybersecurity incidents in the past 12 months compared to a survey average of 41%. Again, if you compare it against the average of 41%, so there's actually a drop, 38% of downtime or lost time or lost money, which shows, that small businesses in Malaysia are taking proactive measures, to fend off the cyber attacks. So that's a very positive sign. Okay, next slide. So the question is, will cyber attacks increase in the future? I think you know the answer, definitely yes. And why? So 85% of cybersecurity professionals attribute the increase in cyber attacks to the use of generative AI. Yeah. So the threat actors will use Gen AI, to attack, to code, to help them hack, into systems. So instead of them figuring out how to do it, they are using Gen AI. Okay, so Gen AI is just like any other tool, right? It's a double-edged sword. You can use it, to help to enhance your work, but on the converse side of it, people can use it, for bad intentions. Okay. Around 46% of respondents believe that the integration of generative AI in business operations will increase vulnerability to cyber attacks, which is for sure. Yeah, because as you depend a lot on Gen AI to increase productivity, to increase efficiency, you'll be collecting a lot of data. We know, in Gen AI, there is large language models, which require a huge amount of data, in order for the Gen AI, to produce an output, that is beneficial to the users. So with that, it gives rise, right, to greater intensity of attacks, because of the amount of data. And then lastly, concerns about AI in cybersecurity include the potential for increased privacy concerns, undetectable phishing attacks, and a general increase in the volume and velocity of attacks. So while AI, everyone is, just singing tunes about AI, and, people are just generally very excited, about the potential of AI. But on the flip side of it, we need to be very mindful, be very, once, we are so dependent on AI, we need to make sure that, we have the guardrails around generative AI. Okay. So with that, I would want to introduce you to our speaker for today. He's going to delve into case studies, specific case studies of, cybersecurity, cyber attacks, right? So Karthik is a highly experienced technology architecture consultant with Deloitte Malaysia, with experience in industries such as oil and gas, healthcare, and financial institutions. His expertise lies in identifying architectural bottlenecks, enhancing operational efficiency, and delivering tailored technology solutions. Karthik graduated with a Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science from Bangalore, India. All right. So before I hand this time over to Karthik, just want to let the audience know, participants know, that you can drop the questions in the Q&A. I believe that you have a link to an Q&A section. So while, Karthik is presenting and you have questions, just feel free, right, to drop those questions in there. So over to you, Karthik.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Bryan. And good morning, all. Like Bryan had already walked you through of my experience. So today, I think to add on to what Bryan had already demonstrated to you in terms of statistics, let me just share my screen just a minute. Can you all see my screen? Perfect. Okay, great. So what I'm going to be really walking you through is, I think Bryan has done the statistics part. Now, even more important is you need to wear attackers' mindset. Organizations typically do this. And why they do this is to understand the digital ecosystem and their threat landscape. I'm going to be walking you through a couple of case studies, and I'm going to have real-time demos, which you will see on how Gen AI, like Bryan had rightly indicated, the use of artificial intelligence, which leads on to an AI versus AI ecosystem at the end of the day. So just to give a context is, every organization is made of a set of blocks. And those blocks are people, process, technology, and supply chain. That's your vendor ecosystem and your counterparties that you work with. Now, we all know, based on every statistics out there and every practice out there, the weakest element in this chain is the people component, because they are susceptible to attacks and they are much more easier than evading technology-based vulnerabilities. So the takeaway here is, many of the threat actors out there are going to come after people of the organization, Now, let me just roll you back to what Bryan had indicated or walked you through earlier is the 48% of the others on why they are being attacked is basically a reverse chain, because governments today really leverage on the big players. Now, everyone in this call, to some extent, and your extended family will have presence on the digital internet through Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, blogs, Instagram, where majority of your life and majority of your day-to-day activities is on these platforms today, which goes on to say that you are pretty much readable or predictable if we understand your behavior on the internet. And much of your life can be deciphered by threat actors by monitoring very, very closely in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis, what you share on a day-to-day basis, which leads me on to a couple of case studies here is how do threat actors really get after the large institutions, typically financial, energy sectors. But there is a common pattern here, the pattern in which every threat actor has to follow. There is no silver bullet, but like it was rightly indicated, where you can be attacked from any corner of your life or your current digital presence. We typically find out ways on how do we get into your organization through the people component, which make up your entire ecosystem. Now, deciphering that will be your social media presence. How do we read you on the digital ecosystem? How do we target you and eventually get to the organization to steal data? So the point of entry is really the people. That's the key takeaway from this slide is whatever we do, whatever threat actors do is more or less inclined towards the people. That is the place where they target. That is the place where they get in. And that is a place where potentially the success rate is high. A couple of case studies that I think we've done a few red team engagements. The definition of a red team engagement is we mimic a real world attacker for organizations, and we try and find a way into these organizations sitting on the internet, sitting right on the outside. How do we typically do this? There are three key institutions that you may have heard of. I'm sorry, I will not be able to disclose the names of them, but in the event, because of the size and complexity of the infrastructure, how do threat actors really get in? The first step is we look at, let me give you an analogy here is look at the organization as a bridge. Yeah. Now in the bridge, threat actors generally target the assets which is there on the internet, and they target the people and the process, which are the three primary pillars of trying to gather more information and trying to find the relevant attack tactic and technique to get into the organization. As per the case study is we first look at LinkedIn, right? Narrow down our targets in terms of which department they work for, what process do they work for, and what are the technology stacks that they use. A classic example is in the case study is amongst all the organizations that we've done a red team on, our success rate of getting through a social engineering exercise is by targeting the people component has been an 85% success rate. And that has given away the information. And to make it more clear is to obtain a username and password from the relevant victim to get into their systems has been the modus operandi of any threat actor. And that seems to have worked even when we conduct red team engagements. When it comes to social engineering, it is all about the user behavior. We look at LinkedIn, we see your supply chain. Majority of the current institutions in Malaysia leverage on the services provided by their vendor ecosystem because it just makes up the business model. It definitely leads to a more productive unit to function as a business. Eventually, what it also does is integration with supply chain also introduces you to cyber attacks because the company which is leveraging the services through the supplier eventually trusts them. There is an implicit trust that you let them into your organization and then conduct the relevant job specific roles that they are meant to conduct. that is where the threat actors really emphasize on, is how we read you on LinkedIn. We look after the Instagram profile that you have, the user behavior across your entire social media channels, which gives away very pivotal information for a threat actor. And what we did is, targeting a supply chain vendor, we knew that one of the person was looking for a job change. Now, the job change is where the subject is. When we know that the person is looking for a job change, we capitalize on that opportunity. We conduct a social engineering exercise by saying that, hey, we understand that you're looking for a job change. How about you try and get on permanent job role onto the vendor that you're working with, or onto the client that you're working with? We convince the employee. Now, this is just another example, but this can be bifurcated or then strategized into multiple use case scenarios, depending on what we really gather during our reconnaissance exercise of that particular victim. Once we give the social engineering page, it looks genuine. Gone are the days where you ask your employees, or if you being a user today, check for spelling mistakes on a particular link. Check for whether there are distorted images on the link that you click. Those are all very traditional based attacks. And we've come to a point where we can't distinguish what is real and what is fake by using tools such as the artificial intelligence ecosystem. We've come to a point where it is getting realistic, and it is going to be very difficult sorry, did I get disconnected? Okay, sorry. To determine what exactly went wrong, right? And what exactly is the cause of such social engineering attacks, which gives away the username and password, and eventually people traverse across the organizations. Once we obtain your username and password, we get into your user account and further laterally move across the organization. Now, this is done by anonymous maintenance, right? We don't create so much noise. If we get access to your account, we keep it low, we keep it anonymous. We try and gather more information. There is a context of studying further. There is a place where we gain more information, understand which are the other departments that we can potentially target to exfiltrate PII, that's personal identifiable information. Now, across this bridge that you see, that's exactly what we do, is get in first after reconnaissance. We weaponize with relevant payloads. We aid ourselves with the arsenal of tools that we need. Then we develop scenarios on what else can we attack. We laterally move across the organization, try to find out which are the critical assets that hold confidential data. We escalate our privileges by using technology vulnerabilities which are introduced, by studying which tech stack you guys are using, and eventually conduct that action on objective, which is more or less exfiltrate the information, or further for financial objectives is execute a malware or a ransomware, hoping that it spreads across the network and bringing down the entire business operation. Now, that's more or less gives you a view of how a threat actor would move across any digital landscape. Now, from the counterintuitive stance is how do we prepare ourselves for such kind of an attack? That's going to be the ultimate goal is, okay, we understand what an attacker does, what a threat actor does, and how do they move. How do we really be proactive about this? Now, much more like the technology and the process, I'm pretty sure that there are controls that the organizations have adopted to by leveraging on best practices and good standards, maintain cyber hygiene, and they definitely implement those controls in environments. But what is it for the attacks that you didn't expect? Now, I'm pretty sure every organization has a risk management layer, and the risk management layer is to ascertain the attacks that may happen to an organization or institution and develop a proactive plan. Cyber will need to fit into that bucket. And one of the major contribution would be is to look at cyber attacks as one of your risk management layers, bring in the relevant business units in your relevant organizations, and then help them enhance on sophisticated attacks that may happen to you that you generally notice through threat adversaries. On the internet, you definitely get articles of what are the recent cyber attacks. Now, if you were to put yourself in those shoes, then I'm guessing that you will want to be proactive about what's happening as well. And now that's where the essence really comes in, right? Is to enhance, is to be proactive, is to look at all these risks that are coming and play it within your organization. If this were to happen to me, what exactly would I do? Which are the business units I need to reach out? How am I going to respond to such kind of risks which are going to come about? That's eventually leads to the development of a playbook. Now, everyone knows here that the more and more you do something on a consistent basis, it develops muscle memory. Now, the same thing applies to any organization. The more and more scenarios that you develop, the more and more sophisticated attacks that you simulate within your organization, eventually is going to develop that muscle memory. And you're going to be in a stance of not being in a situation where you don't know what to do if some nature of this attack happens. But you will always be in a position to exactly execute your muscle memory steps, to involve the relevant team, and to identify and detect more than prevention. The goal here is to put your organization to be able to detect as soon as possible when a cyber attack happens, not more so on how do I prevent a cyber attack happening altogether. That's not possible. You will definitely be attacked. The question is not about if you're going to be attacked. The question is when you will be attacked. That is the goal that you will need to take on from a strategic perspective. When you're attacked, you will need to devise an instrument, a response procedure, and that needs to be practiced and that needs to be seen during your simulation processes. After you do the proactive, or once you simulate more of these scenarios, you will know what's the mindset of a threat actor or a threat attacker. You will develop defensive capabilities. You'll exactly know how do I defend, which asset do I defend, who's the asset owner, what kind of data should I protect, how do I classify that data, how do I label that data, and what is a technology I can use to defend any kind of sophisticated cyber attack. Next is the intelligence. You will need to operate based on intelligence. On the internet, your current IT and security team will work on some level of intelligence that they are currently getting from solution providers like Azure, Microsoft, Google. Any technology or major scale technologies providers will give you that threat information that you can digest, process, and then implement in terms of what needs to be done in order to protect yourself from such attacks. And the last is response and automation. Cyber attacks are happening at scale, and more so ever, you will not be able to deal with so many number of types of techniques and tactics that are being introduced in the current industry, right? In the current sector or current market. Eventually, you will need to make and leverage machine intelligence and automation to a certain extent, where the machines do a significant part of the work for you in terms of prevention and detection. Like I said earlier, the goal is to detect as soon as possible before prevention as well. Yeah. Now, having said that, response and automation by using new tools is going to really help you in accelerating that process because of a very fundamental concept where machines are better at processing data than human beings. They will be able to identify patterns at a faster pace than human beings. So how does this really pay out? Giving you a few, I think this is just an add-on to what Bryan did is the threat intelligence. We've seen that Russia and China and the United States play a major role in embracing threat actors. They originate from these places. They have the capability and the capacity to conduct offensive security techniques and tactics. On the right, you see a set of identifiers, UNC and a number. Those are basically identifiers for the threat actor. majority of the threat intelligence service providers, how do governments really identify is they monitor their activity on the web and they give them a name and they further evolve to understand how these threat actors use different techniques and tactics to attack other countries. Now, the real warfare is the cyber warfare. Everyone must be aware of the geopolitical tensions that is currently happening in the world. And as a consequential effect of that, every country is after data. Every country is after data. You want to know what's happening. You want to be the first person to know what's happening in another country. What's the PII? Which are the sectors? Who's investing? What are the government strategic initiatives? Where are they investing? These have become the prime information for other countries to leverage on and have that first mover advantage over other countries, which eventually leads to nation state sponsored attacks where governments recruit cyber attackers and pay them a fee to eventually go and attack other countries. Just a small breakdown is in terms of response capabilities. The slide really represents if you are currently being attacked, are you able to identify that using your current capacity? Or is someone else coming and letting you know that you've been attacked, you need to do something about it? We see that the Americas, externally, 55% of the companies have been informed from another service provider, and only 45% are able to detect using their own capacity. Now, cascading down to EMEA and APAC, we see that 74% of the cyber attacks have been informed externally, right? So today, all the SMEs in target is if they are being attacked today, they completely rely on external service providers to let them know that they're being attacked. And internally, it's just about 26% where they have a proactive capability and skill set to be able to identify if they are already being attacked. And the response time, eventually, I believe, is how many days does it take if a particular cyber attack happens? And for the APAC region, especially after the COVID times, we've seen that significantly that ransomware extortion is one of the key indicators of attack. And in 2023, it's 33 days, meaning to say is it takes about 33 days to eventually come to a response procedure and identify what's really happening to them. That's a bit on the higher side, and we need to really start focusing on bringing that number down to a local minimum where we are able to demonstrate that we are able to detect as fast as possible and able to act upon what we detect as fast as possible. It's time for a couple of demos. So the introduction of AI, right, from the offensive perspective and from the defensive perspective. As you can all see here, if I'm going to ask you a question of what's fake or real, you will not be able to distinguish pretty easily, but with a little bit of lens behind and with some technical capacity, you will be able to know what's fake and what's real. But to a normal working employee or to a normal person whose job role does not really involve deep technical inclusions, then it is going to be very, very difficult, right? All of these that you see on the screen are fake. Nothing is real. You've just placed another face in front of a real image and you've morphed it. Now, the real question that we need to ask ourselves is, I think 4 or 5 years back, to accomplish such a task, it would take about a good amount of skill, a good amount of coding, a good amount of media or Photoshop skills that you will need to accumulate in order to execute such attacks. But today, for a mere $5 you have tools on the internet which can accelerate this. You will just need to provide an image of a selfie or any person's image that you can download from Instagram or LinkedIn and replace it with a face that you want and what message that you want to convey for a mere $5. Now that is impact. You will be seeing much more of these attacks happening in the future. You will be witnessing that majority of the social engineering exercises, how they target people, how they spread misinformation and disinformation, it is going to be utilizing this utility of deepfakes. But today you go onto YouTube, you don't know who you're speaking or who you're listening to, whether it's genuinely the author who publishes it or someone who's using the author's identity to convey a message to you. That is a matter of concern, and that is a matter of awareness that you would need to inculcate in order to ensure that you really know what you're seeing and what you're consuming as information from the digital ecosystem. So here you see a very prominent figure, which is Dr. Anwar, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And what we can do with the tools in the current market is we have a small demo where we deep faked Dr. Anwar with Morgan Freeman.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
So as you can see there on how easy it is, we deliberately didn't morph the voice because we wanted it to sound fake, but we can also clone voices. All it takes is you go onto YouTube, get a speech recording or speak to one of you on the phone, get a sample of your voices. We just need 1 or 2 samples to literally simulate your voice using the current tools that we have, and then instrument that into such attacks where it really sounds convincing and it really sounds real. Now, can we, or what are the mitigations we have in terms of deepfakes? We have not really reached a conclusion on that yet. It's a risk that is open, and organizations will need to rely on spreading the awareness and only acting on your process and technology. If something that you're clearly unsure of, something you feel it is not based on intuition, I mean, if you have an intuition that it could be malicious or fake, then act on informing or including your standard operating procedures by calling up relevant people and informing that this could be a matter of concern. Next is, today you have different LLMs that you use for your general purpose. I'm pretty sure that most of you must have gotten your hands on ChatGPT and Google Bard. But narrowing that down to offensive or cyber, if you ask these LLMs to create malicious code for you, they eventually decline that request because they want to protect their platforms for not providing a platform for conducting malicious activities. So they have implemented guardrails. But the real power comes when you start training your own models, the own models where you put in data into these LLMs, you feed the data, and then eventually you ask these AI machines to generate the ransomware code. I think I just have, sorry, it's here. So what we have done here is we've created an own LLM, a large language model. We've trained this large language model with specific data. Now, me being a cybersecurity enthusiast, I have given this model data from cybersecurity books, from threat advisories, set of tools and techniques for the model to learn. The key note here is you don't need to be a subject matter expert in any field, considering the current technology that we have. Domain expertise is of essence, of course, but you don't have to be a subject matter expert to understand what your domain does. You just need to feed that information in terms of PDF, files, or anything that you want to include as a part of your knowledge repository. You give the machine that information. It is going to learn for you, And the only skill that you need to have is curiosity and the questions that you ask to this particular machine in terms of prompt engineering. That's where the whole world of knowing what right questions to ask and knowing what are the parameters to ask the machine is of key skill going forward. Eventually, what you see here is once we train the AI model, you can see that the AI model generates the code. That's the ransomware code. And now, I'm sure much of you don't belong to the technology field, but to give you a retrospective view to this particular way of operation, developing ransomware payloads generally typically takes a lot of time. You need to know what you're attacking. You need to know which asset. You need to clearly indicate whether it's a failure or a success. You need to test it. All of that has been narrowed down now. What typically took 4 to 5 months before typically takes 1 to 2 days today by using machine level intelligence. What you see here is malicious code. The system generates malicious code. You can accelerate by asking the system to keep generating based on what you know in real time. In case if I know that there's a particular asset and I know the version number and I know what is the environment they're operating it on, I just put that input into the machine intelligence and ask it to refine the payload for me, which will work, and it is going to generate relevant payloads for me to try out. This is where the rise of offensive security using AI begins. Imagine this tool being at scale, where all threat actors, they're already doing it to a certain extent, but it is just that they're enhancing the way in which AI is used. This is just a basic representation or example that you see, but what we don't see is the sophistication that already advanced threat actors who know their subject, how do they use it? They ask very, very specific questions, and they ask the AI models to learn based on their domain expertise. It is going to provide a much more sophisticated payload, which may work. Now, at the end, it is going to be an AI versus AI model. Today, SMEs are leveraging on cloud solutions. They are leveraging on cloud services, which majority of the time, the risk is on the cloud services, where the cloud service providers generally have sophisticated machine learning algorithms themselves. But the objective there is not for the offensive part, but it is for the defensive part. They have machine learning algorithms, which is like anomaly detection, which is implemented, which will be more proactive in detecting cyber attacks and AI-based malicious payloads. So only an AI will be able to detect an AI-based payload going forward. So ensuring that your dependability on your technology stack becomes of even more essence, and that technology stack will need to come through machine intelligence, where it takes a precedence over all the other aspects to detect and to prevent cyber attacks in the future. I think I've covered my aspect from the case studies and how it's developing and how the trajectory is going to go into the future. And I'm happy to take on any questions that you may have. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Karthik. I like, when you say AI versus AI, I can't help but recall, the scene from Terminator, where the robots were fighting against one another. So it looks like, it may be coming to pass, right, in a cyber world. Okay, so we have a number of questions that are coming through. So as expected, Karthik, I think the question that people always have in their minds, especially those from SMEs, right, and small businesses, is how do you balance the cost, versus the cost of investment versus, the protection that you need to have, against these cyber attacks?
Now, I think it's more dependent and very subjective in terms of SMEs having their technology stack either on the cloud or it's going to be on a data center. But based on your answer, I believe the cloud service providers eventually are definitely on an upper hand here when it comes to detection mechanisms. Their security services, especially, which is the pay-as-you-go model, is quite affordable by SMEs, and they give you a good service package when it comes to cyber itself. So considering your limited resources, your reliance and your dependability on technology takes an upper hand. So eventually you will need to automate, and you will need to rely on tools that can automate a large part of cyber identification or cyber attack identification. So you evaluate with your current service providers in terms of what solutions they bring to the table. It's okay if you have limited resources, but you will need to also bring in skilled resources. And if you are currently not skilled, you have a lot of programs out there where you will need to scale up your resources. In order to develop that curiosity, it's no longer that they need to know 10 different technology stacks in and out to be able to protect you. Like I said earlier, it is a curiosity. You are given artificial intelligence models today in every service provider, or every cloud service provider, or every data center that you go to. They will come up with large language models to assist you. So those resources that you have in your organization should be in a capacity to question the right places, question the right things based on what you see on the screen. Suppose if you're being attacked today and you get an alert, and if they're not quite sure what that alert is saying, that is where mission intelligence comes in, gives you a good view of where you need to go next and what you need to do next. Thanks.
Yep, thanks. I guess companies can really work closely with the managed security services, right? Instead of, shouldering this whole responsibility on yourself, you could work with experts. Okay, so we have a number of questions that we need to answer. So all right, there's one: what role do you see emerging technologies such as AI and machine learning playing in enhancing cybersecurity defenses? I think you mentioned that. You want to just add on if there's any?
Correct. The algorithms today, based on what they are doing, especially the managed service providers, the cloud and the data center as well, there are solutions where we use this algorithm called anomaly detection and generative adversarial networks. Now, these two algorithms, their major function is to be more proactive. They've already seen a large volume of malicious code, malicious attacks, malicious network traffic. They've been trained on that kind of data. So implementing those algorithms, or your current MSPs must already be on the trajectory to adopt those, where they are in a much more better position to identify such kind of emerging technologies in artificial intelligence.
Okay. Next question is, in your experience, what are some common cybersecurity vulnerabilities or weaknesses that organizations often overlook?
The first thing is, I think they still rely on traditional practices such as giving you a social engineering email and asking you, did you identify that it was a social engineering attack or not? I mean, more so to say, I think it's still in a place where humans still make mistakes, even for the simplest forms of attack. But all of that has been moved back. Today, you have sophisticated contemporary attacks that you will not be able to distinguish whether it's real or not. So organizations must spread that, is to bring you the latest information based on demos. You need to see it for you to know the impact. There's not a day in history where you've learned just based on what you read. It's always happened when there is an impact to you, right? In the same context, if you're being demonstrated of what could be a potential impact, you will definitely know that you will not want to repeat it next time. But that's just the awareness part of it. Apart from the technology and the people and the process, where of course you have good practices and standards that organizations deploy, but where they are lacking is bringing people up to speed in terms of awareness. You really need to know what is the new techniques and what is the new tactics. It's quite wide open on the open source, on Twitter, on X you have it, on Facebook you have it, but we need to ingest this data. Others' experiences are gold for organizations. If someone is already being impacted by a certain social engineering attack, that needs to be brought forward and it needs to be demonstrated to people across the organization.
So if I can just add on, so there are certain fundamental cybersecurity principles that a company can apply, even before you start, thinking about the very advanced kind of tools. Number one would be make security as everyone's responsibility, right? So it's not just the IT department, it's every single user in the company. Okay. Second is make security as part of the culture. That everyone needs to be on guard, everyone needs to be aware, right? So you can have all the guardrails, you can have all the protection firewalls, but if someone were to go into, say, an airport lounge, access the public Wi-Fi, and then does some transactions, company transactions, I think that would also open up, for hackers, right, to breach the cyber defense. And build business process that has security around it. So these are really some, basic stuff, right? Basic principles, that companies can apply even before, you start thinking about the tools, right? The tools will just enhance, but we need to get the basics right. Okay. Second last question, I guess. Can you share a recent cybersecurity case study that had a significant impact to an organization? What were the key lessons learned from the incident?
Yeah, so a large financial institution, I think one of the key things is we were able to recon a particular payment services department, which is responsible for reconciliation of transactions. Eventually, what we did is we targeted that person. We understood that they were looking out for a job change. We enticed them with a very compelling social engineering exercise. They were convinced and they gave away the username and password. But the real thing happened after we obtained the username and password. We got into their online Microsoft Outlook, which was a web-based Outlook. We understood the different contacts that they were in touch with. We understood what kind of emails they were sending, what kind of reports they were sending, and eventually got to know that that particular person had access to the critical asset, which stored all the transaction customer info, NRIC information. Eventually, what we were able to get done is using the same username and password, we identified that critical asset, which was an internal application, which stored all the confidential data. We were able to get in and conduct a control channel outside to the internet, meaning we were able to pull out the data from the inside to the outside anonymously, again in small chunks. The way this is done is we slowly snip out data, not in large volumes, but which looks very normal for an organization's eyes, is slowly start pulling out data from the organization in small chunks so that the current technologies definitely have a deceptive figure to say that, okay, this is normal. I don't have to really flag it, right? So, but those kind of tools are being deployed. We were able to exfiltrate that information and demonstrate to the organization that it was possible, and eventually they will need to close it by making some technology changes. And I think that's a key finding that we really implemented during a red team assessment for an organization.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, right? I mean, the enemy is actually in the house or in the home, and we don't even realize it, and then the enemy is taking away bit by bit, as you have described.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question here is, it comes from me because we have students who are joining us today, and as an investor, we look at cybersecurity as a sector that has tremendous potential, right? Because we're really established, right? There's going to be further attacks in the future. So prospects are really bright for cybersecurity space. So Karthik, I mean, you come from Deloitte accounting firm. Do you think accountants will make good cybersecurity consultants? I mean, if accountants were to consider, joining in this particular space, would you encourage them?
Of course, yes. One of the major things is if you already have cultivated some level of domain expertise in accounting, it's just that you will need to have an open mindset to learn about how do you really embrace cybersecurity. Like I rightly said, gone is the age of skill development, and you need to welcome the age of knowledge. If you can inculcate chain of thought reasoning and prompt engineering skills, and then if you're really interested in one, but I mean, not only cybersecurity, but any domain that you want to really specialize in, it's all about asking the right questions, right from fundamentals to an expert level. If you're curious enough, I think you have a way in today's technology era. We've never had this before, and I think it's a right time where you can have a multifaceted expertise just by asking the right questions.
All right. Okay. So final takeaway, from Karthik, ask the right questions and have, curiosity. All right. So with that, we have ran out of time. Thank you very much, Karthik, for your sharing, and I'll hand the time back to the MC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan and Mr. Karthik, for the wonderful sessions, and thank you everyone for sending in the questions.